The election in early November continues to be an exciting topic in today's time, of course, and we're pleased to offer a special panel discussion on the 2018 midterm elections and where we're going to go. To help us, we welcome Dr. Miriam Doucette as today's moderator and expert panelist. So I'm going to ask Dr. Doucette to come to the stage, and I'll introduce her. She's Assistant Professor of Political Science at Cal State Fullerton. She is Political Science Internship Coordinator and Director of the OC Fellows, which is a program that places students in Orange County legislative offices. Prior to her academic career, she worked for 2 U.S. senators, the Government Accountability Office, and the Office of Personnel Management. Her BA is in Political Science from Miami University, and MPA and PhD in Public Administration Policy from the University of Georgia. It is my honor also to bring up Mr. Campbell. Tom Campbell is Professor of Law and Professor of Economics at Chapman University. Professor Campbell, come on, please join us. He served as Dean of Fowler School of Law at Chapman, and before that, Dean of Haas School of Business at Berkeley. He was a U.S. Congressman for 5 terms, a California State Senator, Director of Finance for the state of California, Director of the Bureau of Competition of the Federal Trade Commission, a tenured law professor at Stanford, White House Fellow in the Office of the Chief of Staff, law clerk to U.S. Supreme Court Justice Byron White, and U.S. Court of Appeals Judge George McKinnon. He holds a PhD in economics from the University of Chicago and law degree, magna cum laude, from Harvard. He was chairman of the World Affairs Council of Northern California as a member of the American Law Institute. And part of the reason we're going along today is because of his lengthy bio. Thank you, Professor Campbell. Judge Gray, please join us. He served with the Peace Corps in Costa Rica from 1972 until 75. Judge Gray was staff judge advocate and criminal defense attorney for the U.S. Navy JAG Corps at the Naval Air Stations in Guam and Lemoore, California. Judge Gray was federal criminal prosecutor with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Los Angeles. In 2012, he was Libertarian candidate for vice president, along with Governor Gary Johnson as candidate for president, and the current chair of World Affairs Council, Orange County. And then we have Loretta Sanchez. Loretta is a business person. Prior to her work in Congress, she was a financial manager at OCTA, Orange County Transportation Authority. She received industry recognition when the state of California selected her to independently review the financial status of Orange County's first toll road to save about $300 million in financing costs. Loretta attended Chapman University in Orange, where she was selected in January 2002 to serve as the university's first Latina member of the Board of Trustees. She received her BA in economics in 1982, voted Business Student of the Year, then entered American University in Washington, D.C. to obtain her master's in business administration with an emphasis on finance, which she received in 1984. So pleased to have you. And our final panelist is Carolyn Cabechi. Carolyn, thank you very much. Carolyn is the former mayor of the city of Orange and now leads Orange County Taxpayers Association, OC Tax, as its president and CEO. She came to OC Tax with over a decade of public policy experience gained from serving on numerous city, county, and regional governing boards. Now with this esteemed panel and moderator, let's give them a hand and we can get the program started.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. I can't imagine a more or maybe 3 biggest takeaways from the midterms. I will remind all of our panelists to try to be as concise as possible. I know that's challenging given the topics, but we want to try to get through as much as we can. So would anyone like to begin?
Well, that's a discouraging introduction because I'm in the legal profession. I get paid by the word, but I'll let that go. I must confess I'm a bit surprised that you would want to listen to me up in a panel of this kind because I've run in 3 elections and I've never won any of them. Maybe it was because my campaign slogan is "We all go to gray eventually," and it just didn't quite catch on. But that's why it shows up. I did come in 3rd for Vice President of the United States of America in 2012. I agree it was a distant 3rd, but that is what it is. The overview from my standpoint, and it just overviews everything is the polarization that we are seeing in our country today. And from my perspective, there are probably 4 reasons for it. One is the gerrymandering has just gotten completely out of control. By the way, it started with a fellow who was a delegate to the Constitutional Convention called Elbridge Gerry, and he eventually became a governor, and gerrymandering took off from his. But that's got to change from my standpoint because it's harming us all. The other is the focused media, that I made a big mistake maybe 15 years ago when cable TV came out, thinking, oh my goodness, we're going to have so many choices. We're going to be able to see this aspect and that aspect. And that was simply flat out wrong. That now we find these various media will actually hone in exactly on you and your thinking, and then we'll put those blinders on, and it's us against them to a great degree. Honestly, groups like OC Forum here, or you mentioned that I'm the chair now of the World Affairs Council of Orange County, and we're partnering. These groups bring out nonpartisan types of information. We need more of them, and I salute the Orange County Forum for this. And then the other, of course, the presidential debates, I'm a libertarian, there are others too, the Green Party or whatever, are simply not seen as viable unless they're participating in the presidential debates. And the Commission on Presidential Debates is completely controlled by Republicans and Democrats, to the degree that even their documents say, we are a bipartisan organization to get Republican and Democratic words out to the people. And that simply must change, to the degree that we have to have the criteria be any political party that's on enough ballots in enough states, technically to win the presidency, technically to win the Electoral College, should have a seat at the table. And we brought a lawsuit in that favor. It cost me a lot of money, and we failed every way around. We must, for the benefit of our country, bring in more voices into this, which will bring the radical elements closer together. So, what happened in this past election? Obviously, it was President Trump. I didn't vote for him, but he is the President of the United States of America, and he is divisive in a lot of ways. I think he's done some really good things. I think he's done some things that I strongly disagree with, but I wish the hell he'd shut up. So that has come into this election here in Orange County, as well as an unprecedented amount of money that have come in from out of Orange County for these races. I don't think we'll see these very often, but that's what we have. Otherwise, the demographics in Orange County are changing, and that's fine, bringing in immigration and the rest. Another, though, is a little more subtle, and that is in Orange County, it used to be really overseen by the defense industry, by the aerospace, et cetera. And they tended to be more conservative, tended to be more Republican, and now they've pretty much gone. And so that has not been replaced. The last one I'll mention, and then I'll retire, is I don't really retire, is the lesser home ownership in Orange County. And if you own a home, you're more a stakeholder, you're more a part of this. So honestly, the decision of a voter, I vote that you pay more taxes, is really easy. And that's pretty much what we've come to. If you don't own a home, sure, increase the property taxes, sure, increase these various other things with bond issues, because I don't have to pay it. And so I think that change has made a substantial difference in our elections here in Orange County. That ends my presentation.
Okay, thank you, Judge Gray, for your observations. Carolyn, would you like to?
You know, it's interesting. Uh-oh. Am I now? Okay, am I on? It's very low. I have a really large mom's voice. It's not on. Yeah. All right, this is much better. Yeah, it's not on, sorry.
Libertarians to the rescue.
Yeah, I vote libertarian quite a bit now, I will admit. I was going to say. You know, it's interesting. You know, I found it fascinating since the election. I've been in a lot of different groups and in a lot of different committees chatting, and it's been fascinating to me to sit with Republicans from a lot of different groups and have them have this like horrified, oh my God, what just happened to us look on their face. And for a lot of us, you know, we've been watching the march to this for years, and you just have to look at the data and the numbers. And we've all, those who've been following voter registration changes in the cities, we've all seen this coming. But for me, I think there were multiple forces in play this election day, and I think it was, if maybe 1 out of the 3 or 1 out of the 5 or 2 out of 3, you know, happened, it wouldn't have happened as cataclysmic as it did. But when you had all these forces in play all at once, all on the same election day, it resulted in really candidly the annihilation of the OCGOP as we know it today. And if the Republican Party is going to survive in Orange County, all of the leaders better be sitting in a room someplace and figuring out how they're going to change, because going forward, it's not going to work the way it did. And I agree with Judge Gray. We had a couple of the same ones, and not in any order of significance, but the first is the President Trump. I think he had a play in what happened on Election Day here in November, and not just because people don't like Trump, but because he's such a polarizing figure. So all of a sudden, politics is coming to a bigger fray, where you maybe didn't hear or see about the president, and you didn't even, most normal people didn't even know what was happening in Washington, D.C. All of a sudden now you've got a guy who's, just constantly throwing himself in the news for better or for worse. And so people are having opinions on the president more than they didn't. The other was the unprecedented turnout, and I'm sure you guys know, 71% turnout in Orange County in a midterm elections. Wow. I mean, really unbelievable. Well, that can be good and that can be bad, and maybe we'll talk about that later. The other was the Democratic spending, and maybe Loretta will talk about that. I mean, I'm sure you all know, truckloads of money were backing up into the county, into these Democratic races, more than we've seen in a while. The other, again, as Judge Gray says, the demographics are changing. And at OC Tax, we've been watching the registration shifts over the year. And I hope we're going to talk a lot about non-NPP voters, because there are more NPP voters in the state of California than the Republicans, and they may beat the Dems in the next decade or so if it keeps going. And the other is just a candidate itself. And it's funny, when I came in and I literally asked Francisco when I came in, okay, none of the losing candidates are here, because I want to be really honest. And he said, no, they're not. So I'm going to be really honest. The candidates themselves in a lot of these races are at fault. Number one, over the years you've had poor constituent care. I mean, those of you who are following, some of our Republican congressional didn't have town hall meetings, didn't respond to anything, bad constituent care. You had bad fundraising. We have state officials who live in some of the wealthiest districts in the state of California, and they didn't raise money during their time in office in that cause. And then the other ones, you just had candidates that were unappetizing to voters. And I know a lot of us are maybe inside politics now, but when you go and talk to normal people, and as a former mayor, I get stopped in Target and Home Depot still. So I'm talking to the normal people. They didn't like our Republican congressional not the candidates, are the Congress people. They didn't like them. They couldn't relate to them. They didn't like them. You had one horrific tax vote in South County, and then you had an opposite vote in Huntington Beach, but they still they both got pulled out of office, and I think there's reasoning. So when you have all of that at once, bad candidates, huge spending, president not hardly anybody likes anymore. It just drove people to the polls, and this is what we have. So perfect storm in Orange County.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Professor Campbell, do you want to?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me here and for having this forum. A quick word in support of Judge Gray's simple fairness request that the President of the United States should include candidates of parties that are qualified on ballots, and they should be participating in the debates. It's outrageous that the Libertarian candidate could not be part of the presidential debate. I don't know very many Democratic friends of mine who are pleased with single-party rule in Washington. And I don't know any Republican friends of mine who are pleased with single-party rule in the state of California. Now, the people changed the single-party rule in Washington this last November. But what I take from the election and what I'm very actively engaged in right now is an effort to create a new party. One of the reasons is as simple as what I just described. Single-party rule is not good for our state, and the Republicans are no longer able to provide the balance against single-party rule. In Washington, single-party rule is not going very well at all, and I think we'll begin to see some major improvements from the necessity to reach a hand across the aisle. When I think of issues it occurs so many times that there's a sensible compromise. But the two parties have been driven so far to their extremes that it's death, political death, to advance the compromise. An example that springs to my mind is the one on global warming. It makes eminently good sense to have a carbon tax which is imposed across the United States, all states, because it's a tax that could be used to offset imports from countries that don't have a comparable carbon tax. It would be much more efficient than cap and trade, because a carbon tax creates an incentive to continue to innovate in pollution diminishing technology. Whereas if you have cap and trade, you set the cap and then there's no further incentive to come below the cap. But the problem with a carbon tax, despite its being supported by Nobel Prize winning economists, is that no Republican can say the word tax and I'm in favor in the same sentence. And every Democrat is afraid that they will be labeled a tax and spend Democrat. And so we have let the iconography, the creation of the words to govern our public policy. And I don't see that changing. So my hope, and with this I'll conclude, is that the third way, a new way, would be available for those who are fiscally conservative and socially moderate. I never quite understood why you had to be pro-life in order to be for a strong defense, or why you had to be against any form of gun control if you wanted to balance the budget. These don't have to come from the same column, but they do due to the orthodoxy of the two major parties. It can be done in California. 62,000 signatures is all that it takes, and we can create a new party.
Okay, thank you. Congresswoman Sanchez, what are your thoughts on this recent election?
Yes, so that's the title of the thing. I hope so I'll give you my reflection at a national level and then maybe what happened in Orange County real quickly. But I hope one of the things that we really should get to is what does this mean? I mean, what does it mean to us as people in Orange County? What in particular happened and what we can see coming out of Congress, for example, as well as out of Sacramento. So I think on a national basis, there were several things. The first is, and we saw them on January 21st, the day after President Trump was inaugurated. Women of all stripes going out and marching. And those women were angry. We were very, very angry. Now, think about this. President Trump was elected because 90% of the Republicans who showed up to vote for that election voted for him. So he did not get elected by the fringe, okay, or by the Trumpsters. He got elected by Republicans, to tell you the truth, and by some working class Democrats who were just tired of getting the short end of the stick. So, but women, for some reason, felt just a repugnancy in some ways towards him as they saw him unroll during the transition and what he was really about and the sex tapes and everything. I think women really started to get angry, and they came out and they showed it on the 21st. They said, we're not going to take that type of thing going on in our lives. And of course, Me Too gets wrapped up in that as it comes along, etc. Those same women who were angry on that 21st were the same women who continued to be angry, and they were actually the women even here in Orange County who moved all of these elections. I mean, you couldn't get rid of them. They were just, where can I go? Where can I phone? They would walk into campaign offices, and they were so angry. And remember what happens. So the Senate gets a third of its members up for election, every election. So they have 6 years, a third of them come up. The presidency is every 4 years. The full House is every 2 years. So these women who were angry, in particular at Trump, took it out on Trump by doing the only thing they could do, which was to vote people who were in this election the House members. And that's why we saw, I think, such a passion and such a switch where all of the congressional seats here, for example, are now held by Democrats. So the women, and I even heard this from a Republican who was on the ballot here in Orange County, and he said to me, male, and he said, the 30 and 40-year-old Republican women are very angry, and they are voting for Katie Porter. And in fact, when we're going to get those numbers back, that's what will have happened. This was an election, in particular, for Democratic women, because women were angry. And as we see Trump in this next 2 years, I don't know if it keeps going as strong as it is, but if he doesn't change what he's doing, it's not only going to be at the national level, but I think it will continue to be at the local level. The second thing we had that we'd never seen was money. Money in all the elections. I mean, I'm a good fundraiser, and you all know that. For 20 years, there really was no Democratic Party in Orange County, and I had to raise the money and protect myself, and I had to give the money to the other candidates, and I had to put in the field operations, and I had to. And I did it because I wanted to get reelected. But the answer was that here in Orange County, we didn't have that kind of money. But if you go back and you look at the amount of money that was put into the congressional races across the country for Democrats, it's astounding. It's astounding. And what happened here in Orange County, I mean, it was just really a lot of money. And the third thing I'll tell you is the young people. You know, because I don't know that they came as in a percentage higher because there was also an increase in other voters, but there were a lot of young people who came to vote. And they get their information in a different way than the normal voter that someone like a Rohrabacher was used to dealing with, right? So though that combination of things happening here, plus the fact that I think Democrats had better candidates. I won't say that in each race we had the best candidates, but better candidates than most of the Republicans, I think, was an indication that they would win here. And I'll end by giving you an example. I believe that young Kim in the Royce seat was a good candidate, a really good candidate, okay? She had worked the district for Royce for years. She was a woman in the year of the woman. She's you know, Korean American. She doesn't, you know, scratch the nails on the blackboard most of the time for most of us. That Gill seat, that Cisneros seat that came in at the very end. That should have come in before Katie Porter's seat came in, because according to the numbers and the makeup, if you really understand the way elections come out, he should have won over that district before we would, as Democrats, would win the Katie Porter seat. And the fact of the matter is he won after. And the reason was because young Kim is a good candidate. But in most of the seats, we had, I mean, it hardly looks like his district. I mean, it just does. You know, I mean, you look at him, you go, yeah, that's Newport Beach, that's Laguna Beach, it's just the case, you know? And Mimi, she followed the Trumpster too much. And that killed her when all was said and done. It was that 30 and 40-year-old women who didn't vote for her. So in particulars, I could see the races evolving in Orange County. But overall, I think it was money, it was the Trumpster, and it was people taking their reaction out with the House of Representatives.
Okay, thank you. Carolyn, you alluded to this bit earlier when you talked about the need for the Republican Party to regroup to some extent. So the first question deals with the so-called elephant in the room, which is how should both parties or any party respond to the reality that Orange County is now purple and really trending blue?
Well, and it's been moving this way for a while. And by the way, I'm with Tom on the party. Those of you who know me say I've been preaching that for quite a while. So you may see Tom and I working together pretty hard over the next couple years at this. Well, the demographics in Orange County has just been changing. The demographics in California is changing. And just to kind of give you some money at the state level, there are 25 million registered voters in the state of California. 43.5% of them are Democrats. And if you look at the numbers, the Dems have been staying pretty steady. They go down a little bit, then they go up a little bit, and they go down. But pretty much Dems are just steady. They're not gaining a lot, although they have gained a little bit, I think, in this last one. But Republicans, when you look at the graph, and we've graphed it at OC Tax, when you look at the Republican trajectory, it's like straight down. I mean, the Republicans are just plummeting in California, and Republicans are at about 24% of the registered voters in California. And so if you want to just at the state level, 24% gets you nothing, by the way, unless you're all like grouped in one spot, which it has kind of been in the past with Orange County. But as far as state level offices go, 24%. No party preference is now at 27.5%. So if you didn't realize it, Tom's passed my party in this last year or so, actually about a year and a half before we predicted at OC Tax the pass was going to go. And that trajectory is straight up. So the Dems need to be very careful. And I think it's going to be fascinating, Loretta, to see with this new Dems coming in at the state level and the changes that are going on in your party, it's going to be interesting to see if the Dems don't blow up in 10 years as the Republicans have kind of blown up now. So it'll be fascinating to see when the no party preferences passes the Dems as well. But for Orange County.
Give us 4 years
4
to
years?
blow up.
Okay, we'll do that. You heard it here first.
Very optimistic.
So in Orange County, 3 million, there are 3 million of us here. Half of that, 1.5 million are registered voters in Orange County, 1.5 million. And Republicans still have the plurality, but just barely. 34.5% of the registered voters in Orange County are Republicans. 33.5% are Dems. There's only a 1% difference. There's only 16,000 more Republicans in Orange County than there are Democrats, only 16,000. And OC Tax did a program in October, and we looked the numbers up in October. There were 23,000 more Republicans. So just in 2 months, that delta is dropping radically already. No party preference, 27.7%, and rising fast. So the blue and the purple have been, or the red and the blue have been muddying over the last couple years and mudding and more until it's right now. So candidly, I think the game now is going to be getting those declined estates. They call them no party preference voters now. I think potentially you're going to see party structures weaken countywide. They'll always be big in small little enclaves. And if you haven't gone to ocvote.com, the Registrar of Voters, they've got fascinating graphics. You can pull up the Mimi Walters, Katie Porter race, and you can see literally by color, precinct-wise, where it went and where it didn't go. And it's surprisingly, Irvine obviously catapulted Katie Porter into office. Mimi took, the Tustin, although there were some orange sections that went for Katie as well, too. Anaheim Hills, all that area to the east, the wave kind of didn't go. It kind of half went. But for me, what's fascinating and what you have to deal with the blue is the unprecedented, what it affected on the down ticket. So I think the Harley-Dana race catapulted Kim Carr into office in Huntington Beach. Nobody even kind of had her a little bit on her radar. And in Irvine, I think the Mimi Walters, Katie Porter race catapulted Farrakhan into office. And again, we didn't know, but there was...
And Costa Mesa?
Yes. Look what happened
Katrina
in Costa Mesa.
and all that list?
Newport Beach, it looked like 2 out of the 3 incumbents were going to lose until the very end, and then one of them popped back up and an incumbent lost. So I think, how does Orange County get used to it? I think they're going to have to recognize for the first time Orange County is really the American melting pot. We're all over the place in demographics. We're all over the place in makeup of country of origin. And I think the party systems, the Republican Party system is, I hate to say it's a death knell, but those of us who have been trying to survive in the Republican Party system as a local government, we kind of gave up on it anyway a decade ago when we found out that potentially women at local levels aren't their favorite candidates to support anyway. So and I'm just going to shove that out there on the table because unless Loretta and I decide to have fun in the third, I don't think I'm running for office again. But I think you're going to see the Dems.
I thought you were helping me.
Yeah. So I think you're going to see it. So I think this is the new reality, and they're just going to have to get used to it. And those of us who do this, because we love Orange County, because we love our communities, we're going to have to change. Party system, I think it's going out the window. We're going to have to get to and everyone's just going to have to get used to it.
And you mentioned that you thought a lot of this was due to the changing demographics. This is for you or anybody else. How much of this election do you really think was a result of these evolving demographics versus a referendum on the president?
Both. I would give it equal rate. Probably I'd give changing demographics maybe a little higher. I don't know if anyone else agrees with that. I think sometimes we give President Trump too much power in the room, candidly, so I just want to say that. But I think it is a changing demographic, and it's a changing way. We haven't gotten to ballot harvesting yet. I know we'll get to that. Yeah. It's a changing way to do elections. It's a changing way to get voters out there, and everything has changed. I think we'll be looking back, the next generation of political geeks will look back at the midterm, November 2018, and say, this is where our business changed. This is where we did business different. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
I'd like to comment on your question. Is it President Trump or is it long term? No Republican has won statewide in 2018, 2014, 2010. And the last one was 2006, when it was Arnold Schwarzenegger who would have won without R after his name. So you can't really say it's President Trump. This is much longer and in its genesis. Having said that, the Democratic Party is very likely to run against President Trump for the next 4 cycles, at least. I mean, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party ran against Herbert Hoover from 1932 to 1968. I think I got that right. So President Trump will be at the top of the ticket in all likelihood, barring Mueller events. And so the Democrats will have the target once again. If he wins, well, then that's for 2022 as well, and for 2024 as well. If he doesn't win, it won't stop the argument of, well, where were you when Donald Trump was in office? How did you vote? Were you an enabler? I can hear the words right now. So both are true, the long-term trend and also the effect of President Trump, at least for the next 4 cycles. And I wanted to say one last thing. This is not the counsel of despair. This is the counsel to do something different. Yes. And to do something different, one must be optimistic about California. What concerns me, as I said at the opening, was single-party rule. If you have more than 2/3 in both houses, you can increase taxes. You can put constitutional amendments on the ballot, and that means including Prop 13, without the approval of any single voter. And so just keeping the 2/3 from happening is an achievable goal for a new party. You don't have to say, I've got a plan to elect statewide. All you have to do is say, I've got a plan to elect 2 state senators. And that can be done.
Okay, thank you. Congresswoman Sanchez, I know you had mentioned the youth voter turnout this year, which was extraordinarily high, especially for a non-presidential year in Orange County. Do you, and this is for anyone on the panel, think this was an unusual occurrence in response to the current political climate, like you said, people being angry, or do you think it's a growing trend? And if it is a growing trend, what policy issues will legislators need to focus on to capture the youth vote?
I believe it was a matter of money in our particular case here in Orange County. I mean, let's face it, most campaigns have just so much money, and most of them go to persuade those who they know will show up to vote. I mean, that's who everybody targets. And I never did that, otherwise I would have never won, right? But young people, they're kind of like, in most races, an afterthought. Again, not by someone like me, but that's just the way, the money lasts so long. And so I think what happened this time was we had a lot of money come in. And we had so much money come in and so many volunteers in every congressional race across the nation practically that we were able to talk to the young people and talk to them in the ways that they know how to be, you know, I mean, you know this. I mean, this is how we talk to them because they have their nose right there on their phone. It's now permanently attached there, right? And so we engage them. We engage them and we engage them and we engage them. We engage them in the way that they want to be engaged, which is this way. And I think that as long as there's enough money in a campaign, that they can be engaged and they can be reminded. But I think the biggest difference we saw was the fact that that we talked to them. And I think Democrats did a better way of talking to them than Republicans, simply because of the amount of money that sat in these congressional districts.
And utilizing social media,
Yes.
perhaps, in more effective ways. Does anybody else have any thoughts on these?
Yes, we people who favor good representative government have two discouraging realities to put out there. And one is that people in elections understand that the ultimate reality is that reality in elections is irrelevant. The only thing that matters is the voters' perceptions of reality. And that is not at all frequently the same thing. And the other reality that I would tell you is discouraging is that you cannot educate voters during elections. That just doesn't work, that they have their perceptions and you have to demagogue and you have to put in these little slogans. So what we would have people do is listen to Milton Friedman, who is one of my heroes, who said, look, we should judge our programs by their results, not their good intentions. If we could only get that across to the voters and to our people in government, it would be a positive revolution in our country. Because you have people saying, oh, I want this free stuff, and I want you to forgive my student loans, and I want you to give me a universal health care and all the rest of this, all of which is pretty much unattainable, but it sure gets a lot of votes. So we're facing those realities, and it's hard, and it won't get much easier. One way we could do this is to say, okay, hear ye, Washington, Sacramento, do not pass any legislation for the funding of programs unless you include in that legislation where the money's going to come from. And then people might start realizing that these things, this $1 trillion deficit is it's not running me astray. I'm doing fine, thank you very much. I know I've got my pension and I've got my home and stuff. It's our young people that are in trouble. They're the ones that are going to have to pay this off, and it's totally irresponsible for us to do what we're doing. We have to get things like that, the reality, out to the voters, and we have to do it now.
I know, and it's always an exception.
Carolyn, did you have a comment?
You know, it's interesting, we're hearing about this youth voter surge all over the nation. And I mean, it'll be interesting when the numbers crunching comes back in. But they're surging because their voter numbers were so low to begin with. I mean, youth still
The bar was low.
the numbers for youth were so low. So, at 9%, I think they're talking about 9% of some of the June elections of 18 to 33 growing up. It looks like this massive surge because they never vote. Young voters are still disproportionately still the lowest. But the interesting thing, and this is back to the parties, is that there's still this huge discrepancy in age. So young voters still vote Dem, and older voters still vote Republican. And we could have a whole nother debate on that alone, on why that is. But they did a survey on voters who this was the very first midterm election they ever voted in it. So across the country, the first midterm ever. And I'm sorry, I don't, for those of us in the room, midterms are just normal, right? We don't make a difference between midterms and November, but normal people do. And disproportionately, for first-time midterm voters ever, it's like 60% voted Dem and like 30-something voted Republican. So, yeah, the youth, any surge it is Even if it's not a lot, it was just enough. And I think we'll find that was the difference in some of the Dem votes, because you didn't need that many to roll them over the top. And if the youth came out in any surge, they were going to push Dems across the board. But again, in the grand scheme of things, there's still a smaller percentage. But yes, the other, whatever Tom and my party is in the future, and the Republicans and the Dems need to figure out how to get to the youth to vote and to keep it up, because they can peel it up just a little bit. Still low though.
Okay, great, thank you. Our next question deals with the actual voting process. So I know someone mentioned ballot harvesting earlier. In any election, there's a constant struggle between ensuring voter accessibility and preventing voter fraud. Ballot harvesting, I'm sure many of you have heard of, is a now somewhat controversial practice that allows any third party to return someone's absentee ballot. How do we guarantee access to voting, given some of these new options, while also protecting the integrity of the voting process?
It's worse than that. AB 1921 is not only that, it's you can collect as many as you want, and you could hold on to them for as long as you want. So those of us who run political races, just think about, you're trying to run a city council race or an assembly race, and all of a sudden you hear somebody's collecting hundreds, if not thousands of ballots, and they're holding on to them. So now the Register of Voters aren't taking those voters off the rolls for new mailers, new social media outreach, new anything. They're sitting on those numbers. So now you don't know how many Dem ballots are back, how many Republicans. You run races, you're getting those numbers on a weekly basis and you're responding to it. So it's more than just that. It changes how elections are going to run because they're holding on to that. And it's interesting, in North Carolina right now, it is North Carolina, I think, isn't it? North Carolina right now, they may vacate an entire congressional race because the Republicans did ballot harvesting. And here in California, it's the law of the land. So we can have a big discussion on that.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on balancing accessibility?
Well, I do, because as you probably know, in my first election, that was contested for almost 17 months in the United States Congress, because I won by 984 votes. It was really the first election that anybody saw where the ballots were being counted on a daily basis, posted at 5 p.m. in Orange County, and it took a full week before, and the ballots still weren't counted before we mathematically figured that there was no way that Bob Dornan could win, and we called the election the following Tuesday. Now that seems normal for all of us, right? To see the counting go on. You know, I was working with Harley and in the primary, and his voting went on for 3 weeks, right? The counting of the vote. And on election night, he wasn't up. And I just kept telling him, I've been through this. You just relax. The votes are going to come your way. And, you know, I was holding hands in this general with Gil and with Katie, and, you know, and Harley was going to be okay. I told him that night, you're going to be okay. It's Katie and Gil. And, you know, it was like, just hold off, just hold off. So, and why is that happening? Well, that happens because we happen to have a particular way where we vote by mail, and then we walk our mail into the polling place that day, right? That's what we do. We've gotten smart. It used to be that we voted it and we sent it off. No. Now we hold the ballot. Then we look for all the nasty stuff in the last week, right? And then we make a decision, then we walk it in, because we can't be bothered to actually go in and really stand in line and take the time to vote and everything. We just vote it at home and we walk it in, and that's why it's taking so long to count. So I will tell you that the harvesting is very controversial. I mean, it used to be that daughter of a mom, my mom's 81, I could have her sign it, and then I would sign on the bottom saying, I'm the daughter, I'm going to drop this in the mail or walk it in or what have you. Now anybody can come and collect your ballot for you, etc. And it does lead to, you know, some things that I get worried about. I get worried about, for example, in 2010, I ran against Van Tran, okay? And I would have people, Vietnamese, by the way, I beat him because I beat him in the Vietnamese community, you know? But I had Vietnamese calling our office saying, I'm in the closet, they're knocking on my door to get my ballot. No, really. in Vietnamese to our Vietnamese workers because we did a lot of outreach. And at that time, it was not allowed to do that, right? Now, it's allowed to come to the door and say, can you fill out the ballot and I'll walk it in for you. So I think we really have to think about, yes, we want to make it easy for people to vote, but at the same time,
Do we really? Seriously,
I do.
We really want to make it easy.
Isn't that elitist, Missy?
You know what? It's interesting because I could debate both sides of this. I could debate both sides of this.
Look, I used to walk door to door and some people would be against me and I would say, even though they were going to vote against me, I said, well, I hope you'll do your civic duty and you'll go to vote. Yeah, I would prefer to see, people go and vote. Yes, it's true. We don't educate it. A lot of them just, mean eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I'll tell you the way voters vote. They generally don't even vote by party a lot of time. They vote like, do I recognize the name? Hello, ID. How much do they know your name? Is it a woman? Oh, okay, not enough women. I'll vote for a woman. Is there a Hispanic in the race? Is there a whatever in the race? I mean, that's the way most voters, up until this election, maybe. I mean, they're paying a little bit more attention because the Trumpster does so many crazy things, talking about he should really zip the mouth for a while and we might all be better off. But up until this election, people weren't that concentrated on what the heck was going on. That's all I'll say. And they're, and so hard. I do want it to make it easy for people to vote. Would I prefer that they be educated and everything about that? Yeah, but I mean, are we going to judge? Oh, you only have a 6th grade education. Oh, you can't read. Therefore, you couldn't possibly know who would make a better congressperson. No, I don't think we want to go down that way.
We don't go back down that road. Okay, we have unfortunately reached the end of our time for formal questions, so we're going to open it up for Q&A.
I'd like to make a comment quickly on this, if I may. I was a sitting trial court judge for 25 years here in Orange County, and I learned very quickly that judges have 2 really important mandates. And the first is to do justice under the facts and under the law of the case. But the second is equally important, and that is to have anyone who cares believe that we have a perception that that justice is being done. Equally important. And it's the same thing with regard to voting. I don't know about voter harvesting and fraud and the rest of that. I have no access to information, but I do know that there's a great number of people out here that feels that there's fraud. And we have to put in a system in which not only there isn't fraud, but people perceive that there isn't. So how do we do that? I don't know, but let's get people together and focus on that. One thing, it stands out that, look, you have other places, North Carolina, whatever, that get involved in trying to keep people from voting right before the election. And the answer is no. But now is the time to set up, we have another election 2 years from now, so let's set up a system now in which you can show some form of identification, show that you're qualified without costing anything, but we have a vested interest in doing this. We haven't, but now is the time.
Okay, thank you. All right, does anyone in the audience have a question for the panelists? She's going around with the microphone. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Larry Tenney. I've been doing politics in this county since 1986, and you all are kind of talking around this a little bit, but really this happened because of the ground game that went on here in Orange County. I've never seen a ground game on the Democratic side like we did this time. Back in the day, Joellen and others remember the Republicans used to have a woman named Marcia Gilchrist. She was the queen of get out the vote. The parties in this county have done little in terms of ground game, but the DCCC sent people here and established an outpost in combination with groups called Indivisible that started 2 years ago. And that's the difference that was made on top of all the things that you guys are talking. Candidates, politicians have to get out in the streets because the people are getting out in the streets.
It was a thing of beauty. I mean, as just a political geek, it was an exquisite campaign on the Dem side. The interesting thing isn't just, and I want to respond to that really quick because it was a point I wanted to make, do the ballot harvesting. I've been in a lot of meetings over the last week, and we talked about ballot harvesting and did the OCGP do anything? And they tried it in the Josh Newman recall, and they found out that Republicans do not like to give their ballots to people who come knock on the door. You go to an elderly Republican home and you don't know know them. And it's like, okay, my concealed weapon is coming out, and if you're not off my porch in 5 minutes, there's going to be problems. So it's going to be different because you've got two different types of voters. Maybe as the ballot harvesting becomes a normal activity, maybe as Orange County changes its system and goes as what they're trying to do statewide to all mail-in with voter centers, maybe that'll do that. But you've got two different types of personalities in two different parties, and it worked brilliantly for the Dem. I just gotta say,
it does. We won't give you anything. Shirt off our back. But to the young man over there who said that, yes, and that was a combination of two things. Pissed off people who got involved and money to be able to direct it and target it and move that whole.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to our next question.
Francine Cinto, have any of you given any consideration to ranked choice voting, particularly with the open primary system?
To what choice voting?
I'm sorry, could you repeat your question?
Have you given any consideration to supporting ranked choice voting
Ranked choice.
as they're used in Maine too?
Yes, there are numbers of possibilities. Automatic runoffs or ranked choicing, namely if you have 5 people running, I could go along with 1, 2, and 3, so I vote for 1, 2, and 3, and then you count up all the votes and the winner wins. So that way, you do away with this less of two evils sort of thing, and I think those changes, they're happening now in Maine, and it's promising.
Mission Viejo's considering it too as
Yeah.
well.
And by the way, may I quickly say that with regard to the last question, Tip O'Neill was right at least on one thing, and that is politics is personal, and we saw that demonstrated in this last election.
Okay, thank you. We have another question.
Yeah, I'm curious about the new party idea. First of all, if Carolyn's numbers are right, then and they are, we've all heard them. This new party can get half of the Republicans and all of the disaffected NPPs and still not get anyone elected given the strength of the Democrats. And historically, the country's always been binary. The Libertarians will get 5 to 8%, and the major parties sometimes change. The Whigs are gone, the Federalists are gone, but it's always been binary. How mechanically does it end up that this new party gets some traction? And what's wrong with the Libertarian Party being that vehicle?
I'll take the first and maybe
The applause after that comment was deafening.
And maybe Judge Gray can speak to the virtues of the Libertarian Party. So pragmatically, focus on 2 state Senate districts, because that's the majority over the 2/3. Okay, so don't go statewide. I understand, but can I find 2 state Senate districts with a termed out or a retiring incumbent, where the Dems and the Reaps are running more than 2 candidates in what is the first round, and 1 center party candidate? Can I find in the state of California 2 state Senate districts like that? You bet I can. Then what you do is focus on getting that person into the finals. So the top 2 system makes the third party possible in a way it never did before. The old system, the third party, the fourth, the fifth, the Greens, the Peace and Freedom folks, they all had their chance to come to the ballot in November and they never won. But if you're on the ballot in November against only 1 opponent, poll after poll shows Californians will vote for the independent.
Poizner's not our insurance commissioner now.
I completely grant the point, and it's the exception that Steve Poizner became the closest of any non-Democrat. He did very, very well. And focus, please, for a moment. He ran statewide.
Yeah.
The numbers statewide are Democratic.
And still only lost by about 100,000 votes.
Very narrow.
So very narrow.
But give me 2 state Senate districts or 4 state assembly districts, and the fact that the law already has this top 2. So, to focus, open seat. Not hopeless Democratic or hopeless Republican registration.
In the middle.
Contestable. A candidate of some quality, and 1 centrist with more than 1 Democrat and more than 1 Republican. The polling that we've done on this demonstrates, whether you're speaking of North, South, Central Valley, the independent with nothing else wins. If you get to the finals. Okay, so what happens if you get to the finals? Now, in Sacramento, there would be 2 state senators forming a very small caucus called the Centrist Caucus. and neither party can do without them if they intend to get a tax bill through, or a regulatory bill through that the courts would determine is a tax bill, or to put a ballot initiative for a constitutional amendment on the ballot. They would have to come and deal with the centrists. Lastly, I'll let Judge Gray speak to the merits of the Libertarian Party. Let me say, I have nothing but respect for Judge Gray personally and for the tenets of the Libertarian Party. I believe we need something new or we won't capture the energy we've been talking about.
All right, Judge Gray, you get the last word, and then we have to wrap up.
Thank you for that, Tom, deeply. Breaking news. If I have anything to say about the Libertarian Party in the upcoming presidential election, it is that we will focus on 5 small states only. And we will focus on winning at least 3 of those, 2 of those. And if we do, the chances are pretty strong that neither the Democrat nor the Republican nominees would have enough electoral college votes. And then no Republican would vote for the Democrat, no Democrat would vote for the Republican. The Libertarian candidate would win the presidential election. That's going to be the strategy. And it's exactly for that reason that you mention it.
Okay, good.
We have time. We have time for one more question.
Okay, before we do this very last question, Professor Campbell did want to make a little announcement.
Oh, simply that I brought handouts. So I just happen to have 80
And he
handouts.
has great handouts, too.
So please, if you're interested, it also tells you how to contact me. Also, we need a name. So
We're going to have to poll for that.
I think we're going to have to poll for that. So thank you very much. If you'd like, it's there. I appreciate your taking it.
All right, here's our last question.
Greg Rass from Mission Viejo. We do have 5 Republicans on our city council, so we're the last red in the county, I believe. But at the national level, yes, Katie Porter, 3 times they came to my house, and Mimi, her group never showed up. So it's amazing ground game. But at the national level, the Republicans deserve to win. They never got on board with Trump. They didn't pass the Health Care Act. They didn't pass immigration reform, and they kept spending money like drunken sailors. So they deserve it. I think this group we have now with split leadership or in Washington, D.C. is going to actually do a pretty good job. So I'm excited about that. So, but as far as Orange County, we need to regroup.
Okay, good.
So just a statement, no question.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Okay, let's thank the panel and Dr. I do have to say one thing. I agree what Carolyn said. Nobody's coming for my ballot. Okay, I'm going to turn mine in. So if anybody wants to, a spare warning, no. So as we close today's program, I'd like to thank all of our sponsors for their continued partnership with the Forum. I'd like to thank Dr. Doucette for a great job moderating and the insights of the esteemed panel. Let's give them another round of applause. On a special note, the Orange County Forum would like to extend a very special thank you to friends at Cox Communications. With their assistance, the OC Forum has been broadcast on local TV and on-demand channels. The Forum is happy to announce our next programs on the calendar. In January 2019, we'll be having our annual State of Orange County discussion with Chairman Andrew Doe of the Board of Supervisors. So thank you all for braving the rain. Thank you for being here. This is my last program as president. I had a great audience here. Thank you. I will still be on the board. But thanks for being here, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Have a healthy and prosperous 2019.
It was a pleasure to see you.
Thank you.
Carolyn?